Hey, 42 here. If you've ever been to the sea, you might have noticed there's an awful lot of it. Oceans cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface and impact your daily life in ways that probably never even occurred to you. They regulate the global climate and drive weather systems, so no matter how far you live from the coast, oceans had some influence on what you chose to wear today. Nice mankini, by the way. And look around you. No, not literally, keep watching me. Your life as you know it would be quite different without marine transport. About 90% of the stuff that's traded around the world is carried by ships, which includes everything from food to clothes to furniture and cars. Even the fuel in those cars and the smelly things you hang from the rear view window. If it weren't for sea travel, you probably wouldn't have the device you're watching this video on right now. You probably wouldn't even be alive, since oceans are widely regarded as the birthplace of life itself. So yeah, they're a pretty big deal. You would think we'd know more about something so important to us, but it seems we're still mostly clueless about the sea. More than 80% of the world's ocean depths are still unexplored. Like oysters, they remain a big, wet, salty mystery. But the riddles don't just lie beneath the waves. For as long as humans have been sailing the high seas, they've been collecting tales about strange phenomena like mermaids, sirens, sea monsters, magical realms, and haunted ships. Of course, most of these stories come from sex-starved men full of gonorrhea and rum, so they should probably be taken with a pinch of sea salt. There is one genuine mystery, though, that remains unsolved almost 150 years after it was discovered. The bizarre account of the ghost ship, Mary Celeste. Did you know you can customize, upgrade, and go exploring with your very own ship in World of Warships, who have kindly sponsored this video? I've been loving playing this game recently. As a huge history nerd, I really appreciate the realism and historic accuracy of the 300 plus ships you can control in the game. The design of these ships and the attention to detail is remarkable, such as this Weymouth cruiser based on a real British ship from the 1910s that I've been using recently. Isn't she a beauty? You can upgrade your ship's weapons and armor to turn it into an unstoppable terror of the seas. With your ship, you'll explore stunningly beautiful living landscapes with weather that changes mid-battle. My favourite part of the game is the online team battle against other warship custodians from around the world. It really keeps me on the edge of my seat. It's a fast-paced struggle to outplan and outmaneuver your enemies, and I've just been having a blast with it. There's never been a better time to jump into World of Warships, because if you register through my link in the description, you'll get an exclusive starter pack, which includes 200 doubloons, 2 ships, the St. Louis and the premium ship, Emden, 20 Restless Fire camouflages, 2.5 million credits, and 7 days of premium, so don't miss out. It was the 4th of December, 1872. In the preceding months, Mount Vesuvius had erupted in Italy, the first ever FA Cup final had been held in England, and some guy had patented dried milk. A week later, a meteorite would strike the Earth near a small town called Banbury. But none of this mattered to Captain David Morehouse, commander of the Canadian ship Dei Gratia, as he stared through his telescope at a vessel on the horizon, drifting aimlessly in the North Atlantic Ocean. Morehouse knew the boat. It was the Mary Celeste, a cargo ship that had left New York 8 days before him, loaded with about 1,700 barrels of denatured alcohol. Denatured alcohol isn't like rum. It has an alcohol content between 70 and 99% and is used as a solvent, cleaning agent, disinfectant, and fuel. Drinking it will make you blind or dead. Okay, maybe it is a bit like rum. By that stage in her career, the Mary Celeste had already accumulated a fair bit of bad fortune. Originally registered under the name the Amazon, her maiden voyage in 1861 from Nova Scotia to London was delayed when, just before her departure, the captain fell ill and died. Remember that bit, it's important later. Then, with a new captain, the Amazon sailed across the Atlantic, but collided with fishing equipment off the coast of Eastport, Maine, before running into and sinking another ship in the English Channel. A few uneventful years passed until October 1867, when the Amazon ran ashore during a storm, being so badly damaged that her owners abandoned her as a wreck. The derelict boat was eventually bought and sold a number of times before it was restored and renamed the Mary Celeste. When Captain Morehouse found the ship floating in the open sea, there's a good chance he knew nothing of her checkered past. But if he had, it's safe to say alarm bells would have been ringing. As he inspected the ship more closely, he noticed she was moving frantically and that her sails looked rather odd. He also knew the Mary Celeste should have already arrived in Italy, so realizing something wasn't quite right, the captain changed course to investigate. When members of the De Gracia crew boarded the Mary Celeste, they found her deserted, but with no indications of where everyone had gone, or more importantly, why. There were no signs of fire, violence, or a struggle. The sails were in bad shape, some missing altogether. And the rigging, that's what landlubbers like us call a system of ropes which hold a sailing ship's masts in place, was damaged and hanging out of place. The main hatch, which is the big hole in the middle of the deck where you load and unload cargo, still had its cover on, but the covers of the hatches at the front and back of the boat, fore and aft in sailing terms, were off and lying beside the hatches on the deck. The cargo of industrial alcohol was untouched, which ruled out pirates or blind alcoholics as an obvious cause. About 3.5 feet of water sloshed around the cargo hold, which was a significant amount, but not alarming. Someone had disassembled one of the 2 pumps, but the vessel was still perfectly seaworthy. The only thing of importance missing was the lifeboat. Well, Lass and all the people, obviously. The crew's belongings were still in their quarters, and there was enough food and water on board to last another 6 months. Most of the ship's papers were missing, along with the captain's navigational instruments, and in the mate's cabin was the ship's logbook with its final entry dated at 8 AM on the 25th of November, 10 days earlier. The final logbook entry placed the Mary Celeste within sight of Santa Maria Island in the Azores, a group of 9 small volcanic islands in the middle of nautical nowhere. By the time Morehouse and his crew discovered her, she had drifted almost 750 kilometers to the east. 10 people were missing from the Mary Celeste, including Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, his wife Sarah, the couple's 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 7 crewmen. None of them were ever seen or heard from again. Briggs was part owner of the boat and an extremely experienced skipper. He handpicked his own crew, and they were all regarded as first-class sailors. Overall, a crack team, and not the type to abandon ship without a serious reason. So, what was that reason? Why and how did 10 people disappear from the Mary Celeste without a trace? These questions would soon fill newspapers and books across the globe, but first they appeared in the law courts of Gibraltar. After finding the Mary Celeste, Captain Morehouse decided to sail her to Gibraltar, about 1,100 kilometers away, so he could claim salvage. The law of salvage is an ancient part of international maritime law that says anyone who helps rescue or recover a ship or cargo is owed a reward proportional to its value by the ship's owner. In this case, Morehouse and the crew of the De Gracia had rescued the Mary Celeste and sailed her back to safety at their own risk. When the ship arrived in Gibraltar, she was confiscated by the authorities until the salvage hearings could be resolved in court. As part of those court proceedings, it was suggested the disappearance of Captain Briggs, his family, and his crew were down to foul play. Marks were found on the bow of the ship that some claimed were made by an axe. There was also dark stains found, both on the boat and on the captain's sword, that might have been blood. The Attorney General in Gibraltar believed the crew got drunk one night on the alcohol in the ship's hold, even though it was undrinkable, and slaughtered Captain Briggs and his family in a drunken frenzy before escaping in the lifeboat. Just a regular Friday night then. But soon the results of scientific tests proved nothing dodgy had happened aboard the Mary Celeste, and after 3 months the authorities released the ship from custody. Captain Morehouse and his crew received less than $8,000 for their salvage efforts, which was well below the expected payment given the value of the ship and its cargo. Unfortunately for Morehouse, the court case had generated rumours that he and his men had killed the occupants of the Mary Celeste so they could claim the ship for salvage. That accusation wasn't ever proved, but the doubts never quite faded, and by awarding such a small salvage settlement, it seems the court also remains suspicious. Other theories of foul play have Briggs and Morehouse as friends, conspiring to claim the insurance money for the ship and staging a disappearance. Another, admittedly somewhat ridiculous, view was that Captain Briggs, who was a devout Christian, had lost his mind in a religious frenzy and murdered everyone on board before killing himself. Just a regular Sunday then. In the decades that followed, the story of the Mary Celeste was retold and exaggerated many times over. In 1883, the Los Angeles Times published a false narrative in which the ship was found in perfect condition and fully rigged. The cooking fire was burning in the galley stove. Dinner was on the table, barely cold, and the logbook was updated to the hour before the ship was found. The next year, Arthur Conan Doyle, the man who would later become the author of Sherlock Holmes, wrote a short story based on the Mary Celeste. It was a fictional piece, but as with the LA Times story, much of it became accepted as fact. These kinds of fabrications have made it even harder to come up with plausible explanations for what happened aboard Captain Briggs' ship, but a few proposals have gained popularity over the years. Let's get the first and most obvious one out of the way. Briggs, his family, and his crew were whisked away by aliens. Since aliens are apparently responsible for building the pyramids, making crop circles, assassinating JFK, and impregnating my neighbour, Janet, I suppose we should at least consider the possibility that they swooped down on a random ship in the middle of the sea and kidnapped all of those on board, because aliens obviously have nothing better to do with their time. Another guess is that the Mary Celeste was hit by a water spout, the oceanic equivalent of a tornado, which would explain all the water in the ship's hold. A water spout would also have caused the atmospheric temperature to drop, which could have driven water from the bilges, the bottom part of the ship where all the gunk collects, up into the pumps. This might have convinced the crew the vessel had taken on more water than she actually had, and was therefore in danger of sinking. Under such circumstances, Briggs might have chosen to abandon ship whilst he was still in sight of land. Building on the theme of natural disasters, other commentators have theorized an earthquake on the seabed, imaginatively known as a seaquake, which may have generated enough turbulence aboard the Mary Celeste to cause the spillage of alcohol and the release of alcohol fumes. That would potentially explain the hatches, which might have been opened up in an attempt to air the cargo hold. It would also tie in with the 9 empty barrels that were found on board. If there had been a build-up of fumes, Briggs would have been concerned, and that concern may have been elevated by rumblings from the cargo hold, the smell of fumes, perhaps even an explosion. In that case, Briggs and his crew might have climbed into the lifeboat, attached it to the ship, and allowed themselves to float behind it at a distance. That might seem like a reasonable enough response to the situation, but one has to question the sense in tying yourself to something you think might be about to explode, especially since a lifeboat in the open ocean is far from a safe place to be. Next time you go swimming, throw a cork into the pool and then do your best cannonball. That'll give you some idea of what a small lifeboat might face in the open ocean. All it would have taken was for the tow line to come loose or snap, and the ship's occupants would have been in serious trouble. Some experts suggest the Mary Celeste would have been a safer bet than the lifeboat, even if she had suffered an explosion, and that Briggs would have been a fool to abandon ship. But the alcohol explosion view of events had a lot of support at the time, and gained some credibility from later reports of ships whose cargo had exploded under similar conditions. It was also noted the 9 empty barrels were made of red oak, unlike the other barrels which were made of white oak. Red oak is more porous than white oak, and it's possible some of the alcohol may have seeped out of the barrels, filling the cargo hold with more toxic fumes than the last time you farted under the duvet. The main argument against the idea that the Mary Celeste crew were trying to escape an explosion was that no scorch marks or evidence of an explosion were ever found, which is quite important when suspecting an explosion. But in 2006, an experiment carried out by Dr. Andre Seller of University College London showed that such an outcome was perfectly possible. Seller built a replica of the Mary Celeste's hold with paper cubes to represent barrels, and then used butane to generate the type of explosion that would have happened had alcohol fumes in the hold ignited. The results showed a massive explosion with no burning, no scorching, and no soot left behind. According to Seller, the trapped gas created a pressure wave type of explosion, with a spectacular surge of flame, followed by relatively cool air. Such an explosion would have been enough to blow open the hatches and have everyone fleeing the ship like, well, rats fleeing a sinking ship. Too many. An alcohol-fueled explosion and a desperate evacuation is the most logical and scientifically sound explanation of what happened to those aboard the Mary Celeste. But forensic researcher Anne McGregor thinks there's more to the story. After cross-referencing notes from the salvage trial with the ship's log and oceanic data from the time, McGregor concluded Briggs' instruments were probably damaged because his measurements appeared to be wrong. He was actually 120 nautical miles west of where he thought he was. It seems the ship had experienced lousy weather the night before the final logbook recording, and with the pumps broken, perhaps due to coal dust build-up from a previous cargo, the crew had no way to measure how much water had been taken on in the rough seas. If Briggs suspected there was too much water on board, he would have had a decision to make. If he pressed on, he knew there wouldn't be land for hundreds of miles. So, if there was a possibility the ship was sinking, their best chance would be to head for Santa Maria Island, which, by his faulty calculations, was nearby, whilst they still could. That might not have been the best decision, but it also wouldn't have been crazy. One issue with many of these theories is that Captain Briggs not only abandoned his ship, he also abandoned his logbook. If he really did think the ship was slowly sinking, he would still have had plenty of time to collect the log, or at least to scribble a quick note as to his plans. Ship's captains in the 19th century were not in the business of forgetting to make crucial entries in their logbooks, no matter the circumstances. Of course, we'll never know for sure what happened to those on board the Mary Celeste, but we do know the ship's bad run continued long after the mysterious disappearance of her crew. When the trial in Gibraltar was concluded, she sailed to Italy, as originally planned, to deliver her cargo, before heading to New York. But by the time the Mary Celeste arrived in the Big Apple, the rumours of bloodshed, murder, mutiny, and inexplicable disappearances had circulated throughout the shipping world, and nobody wanted anything to do with her. Eventually, the owners were forced to sell her at a considerable loss. The new owners didn't fare much better, with the ship consistently losing money, and in 1879, she called in at St. Helena Bay to seek medical help when the captain fell sick. He died on the island shortly after in a sequence of events eerily similar to the way in which the ship's first captain had died. I told you that bit was important. All told, the Mary Celeste had seen 3 captains die prematurely, fueling speculations that the ship was cursed. 6 years later, luck still hadn't improved, and the desperate skipper, a Captain Parker, conspired with a group of shippers in a crooked plot to finally make some cash on what had been a truly terrible investment. They filled the Mary Celeste with worthless cargo, which they insured for $30,000, about $850,000 in today's money, before deliberately running the vessel aground near Haiti, wrecking her forever. Investigations by the insurance company revealed the attempted trickery, and Captain Parker and his accomplices were soon facing trial in Boston for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Parker was also charged with willfully casting away a ship, a crime known as barratry that used to be punishable by death. Luckily for the captain, he avoided a death penalty, and the jury was split on the crime of fraud, so Parker went free. But his reputation was ruined, and he died in poverty just 3 months later. One of his fellow defendants went mad, and another killed himself. Even under normal circumstances, this would be an almost unbelievable chain of events. But looking back, it seems very little was normal about the Mary Celeste or those who came into contact with her. Perhaps it's for the best she now lies in a permanent, watery grave at the bottom of the ocean. Thanks for watching, and thanks again to World of Warships for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check them out using the link below.